La perfezione nell'uomo non è la mancanza di bisogni, ma la pienezza di amore, che è tutto quello di cui l'uomo ha bisogno. L'amore puro si chiama Dio, l'energia che tutto crea e che tutto fa muovere. Donato Coco. Il paradiso, la prima residenza dell'uomo, il luogo in cui l'uomo era felice con e come tutto il bestiame del cielo, della terra e del mare e tutti i vegetali voluti da Dio. L'uomo aveva un dono in più, l'intelligenza, e dunque la licenza di dominare su tutte le altre creature volute da Dio. L'intelligenza però conduce l'uomo a sentirsi superiore, a peccare di superbia e dunque per questo viene cacciato dal paradiso, ma con la possibilità di poterselo meritare. Da qui la domanda che più di qualsiasi altra rivolgiamo a Dio e a noi stessi. Gli esseri umani hanno ancora la possibilità e la capacità di meritare il paradiso? La risposta è sì, ed è proprio quello che vedremo in questo video. E allora tieniti forte, perché io sono Mio Capitano e questo è il momento del dolce mistero ad occhi aperti. Oggi ti presento la stupenda testimonianza di Richard Cole, l'uomo che ha parlato con Dio. Il paradiso c'è ed è per noi. Chi lo ha potuto visitare lo ha descritto come un luogo immenso fatto di una avvolgente luce dal sapore di pace. Probabilmente quella pace che qui possiamo sperimentare in maniera simile quando siamo assorti in preghiera, ovvero in comunicazione con Dio. Chi ha descritto il paradiso lo hanno fatto coloro che ci sono stati e sono tornati qui sulla terra per raccontarcelo. Sono coloro che hanno avuto una NDE, dall'inglese Near Death Experience, in italiano esperienza vicino alla morte. Nel gergo italiano questa esperienza viene chiamata premorte, quindi prima della morte. Allora qual è il modo giusto per definirla? Esperienza vicina alla morte o prima della morte? La verità è che questo gergo è assolutamente inappropriato, perché sappiamo sin da bambini che ciò che chiamiamo morte è l'inizio di una nuova esperienza di vita della nostra anima. Tutte le persone che hanno fatto un viaggio nell'aldilà con destinazione paradiso hanno raccontato esperienze simili tra di loro, e questo aspetto per questa e per qualsiasi altra indagine è di grande rilevanza. Le similitudini tra queste testimonianze fanno pendere enormemente il piatto della bilancia dalla parte della veridicità di queste esperienze. Ma tra le variabili che possono esserci nei racconti di questi testimoni in materia di ciò che hanno visto o di chi hanno incontrato, vi è comunque una costante, ovvero la percezione di un grande, immenso, puro amore. La testimonianza riportata a noi di Richard Cole è diversa da tutte le altre. Lui non ha viaggiato lungo spazi immensi e non ha incontrato parenti morti prima di lui. Lui ha ascoltato una voce ed ha percepito proprio quell'immenso, intenso, puro amore a cui facevo riferimento prima, e dunque ascoltiamo dalla sua stessa voce il suo straordinario racconto della sua straordinaria conversazione con Dio.
My name is Richard Cole, and I am 72 years old. I have never been what I would call religious. I've always believed that there was a God, and I believed that there was Jesus, but I've had doubts. I've been a doubter before, but I'm no longer that. And this happened to me in 2005, so that was 6 years ago. And so how it came about was that I was on my way to Monterey. I go up there every year for the historic car races. While I was stopped at the stoplight, I had a pain that started in my jaw, right in the mandibular area, went down my jawbone, down my carotid artery, and into my chest. I said, "Whoa, this is strange." My friend and his wife said, "What's wrong with you? You don't look very good. What's your symptoms?" I said, "Well, my hands feel a little sweaty and I feel a little clammy." I said, "I don't know what's going on." He says, "I'm going to take you to the hospital." I said, "Oh, I'll be okay. I'll go home and take an aspirin. This will be done with." He says, "No, we're going right now." So we went in and they put me on a gurney because there was no room in the emergency room. My blood pressure was extremely high. And they gave me a couple of shots right away to try and get my blood pressure down. And then I went right into the x-ray room, and they gave me some x-rays, and came back in a little while, and Steve, the doctor, a friend of mine, says, "You have a serious problem." And I said, "Oh, really?" And he says, "Yes." He says, "You have an aneurysm, but what's worse, it's split, and I think you're bleeding internally." 5 o'clock the next morning, I was in the the ready room rather, at Cottage Hospital. Anesthesiologist came in and says, "Well, I'm going to, give you a shot right now, and then you're going to go off to sleep." I said, "Okay." I said, "Is the doctor here yet?" "Yeah, he's here." So I asked to see him. I said, "Okay, what are you guys going to do to me?" And he says, "What we have to do is cool you down to a real low temperature, and when we do that, it'll be just like chopping a hole in Lake Michigan in the ice in the middle of the winter. Everything's going to stop. Your brain's going to stop, and your heart will stop." I said, "Well, I've never heard of that before, and I read it all." And he says, "We usually don't tell our patients what we're going to do to them, or else they'd run down the hall dragging the IV behind them." They told me when I went in that I'd have about a 50-50 chance of making it. I found out later with that kind of operation where they take your heart out, you have a 10% chance of survivability.
Cosa mi farete? Abbasseremo la tua temperatura e così il tuo cervello si fermerà, la circolazione, il cuore, tutto si fermerà. Porteranno praticamente l'organismo di Richard alla soglia della morte. Ma la sua coscienza, la coscienza di Richard, non si interromperà mai e lo dirà, adesso lo ascolteremo. Questa è una grandissima prova che noi siamo di più di una semplice entità biologica all'interno di un ecosistema. Questa è una prova che la nostra vita continua oltre quella organica. Continuiamo ad ascoltare la sua straordinaria testimonianza.
So the anesthesiologist put the IV in. I went off to sleep right away. They start rolling me down the hall to the operating room. And then I realized that I was still conscious and I wasn't under yet. It was like I was for a little bit, but then I was awake again. And I saw them roll me into the operating room. And so I wanted to tell the doctors that, hey, you got to give me some more of whatever it was you gave me because I'm not out yet. But I couldn't speak. I didn't have any pain or anything like that. I just could not open my mouth and get the words out, even though I tried very hard to tell them that I was still conscious. So I'm laying on the table, and there are 3 doctors standing over me and 2 nurses, and they all have their gowns on, their masks on and everything. They're ready to go. And I heard the doctor ask the nurse for the scalpel, and she got it, and she started to open me up from right here down to here. He did. Opened me up like that, and then they got an electric saw out and started cutting my breastbone open. And then I saw them go down and start to take my heart out, and then everything went black. But I was still conscious, but I couldn't see anything. And it was like a heavy black fog, and I'm just standing there looking around. I couldn't figure out what to do next or what was going to happen next. Right then, 2 beams of light came over my right shoulder, so I started to turn around and look over my shoulder to see where it was coming from. And then I heard a voice, and the voice was very authoritative, not loud, but he says, "Don't turn around." And I'm thinking, well, why not? And he says, "Don't turn around because if you see my face, you'll have to stay here." And he says, "Now, that'll be okay if you stay here, but I have a job for you. And if you disobey me, I won't be happy." And he says, "You don't want to see me unhappy." So I said, "Yeah, well, okay. I better pay attention and do what he says." And then I said, "You know, I know who you are." He said, "Oh, you do?" And I said, "Yeah." And all during this conversation, I had a feeling of where he was, that he was walking back and forth behind me, that he was sitting in a white throne, just a plain chair, didn't have jewels or anything on it, but just a plain white chair, and I could just feel that, and I don't know why. That's what I was feeling. The next thing that happened is he said, "Do you have any more questions before you leave?" I said, I said, "You know, I got to think about this." And I thought, I was thinking really hard, what am I going to ask God? Couldn't think of anything. I wanted to be really smart enough to ask him something very pertinent. And so I said, well, I'm going to have to revert to an old cliche. What's the meaning of life? And he starts laughing again. I said, what's so funny now? And he says, well, I don't know why, but a lot of people ask me that question, and it's really real simple. But I tell you what, when you come back, we'll sit down. You can ask me all the questions that you ever will have. I'll answer them for you. So I said, okay. He says, okay, it's time for you to go back. And I turned around. I'm sorry, but he put his arms around me. He put his arms around me. And it was a feeling that I can't explain. It was unconditional love, but it was words I can't tell you the words. And I'm sorry, but I always act like this because I can feel it again. So, changed my life. And the next thing I heard was the nurse was saying, I think he's ready to come out of it. His temperature's at 90 degrees. 9 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. First thing I wanted to do was go out and tell everybody I knew what happened to me. But I'll have to tell you that my life has changed completely. I'm no longer afraid of death. All the problems that I thought were problems are all gone. I don't have any problems. I don't have anything that gets me down. A week later, a guy came in that I knew, and he said, I heard about your experience. I said, yeah, it happened. He said, I heard that you were, you had a near-death experience and that you were out for about an hour. And I said, yeah, that's true. And he said, well, the same thing happened to me. And I said, and then I asked him what the meaning of life was. And he says, oh, that's easy. It's all about love. That was the perfect answer. So I got that message right away. Now, I studied the Bible, and it's taken me a long time. I've been doing it for 6 years. I'm up to Matthew. I've translated every word from the original manuscripts into English. I was baptized recently. People ask me questions about that. Well, why are you getting baptized now? And I said, because it's the right time. I don't know what else to tell them. I don't believe that you have to be baptized to go to heaven, but I know one thing. I want to follow what Jesus did. He set an example. I want to, so I did.
Tanto che se uno è in Cristo è una nuova creatura. Le cose vecchie sono passate, ecco, ne sono nate di nuove. San Paolo Apostolo, dalla seconda lettera ai Corinzi, capitolo 5, versetto 17. Di tutta questa testimonianza, sicuramente l'amore provato da Richard è il fulcro di tutto quello che ha vissuto. L'amore è poi anche la risposta alla sua domanda su quale sia il senso della vita. Dio è amore puro e lo prova forse più di tutto il fatto che Dio chiede a Richard di voler tornare indietro, e quando Richard gli risponde positivamente, Dio lo ringrazia, gli dice grazie per il tuo voler tornare indietro, lo ha messo davanti a una possibilità. Vuoi restare qui? Guardami e resti qui. Vuoi tornare indietro a diventare un mio messaggero? Puoi andare. Dio non si impone mai, altrimenti sarebbe una forma di violenza, di sopraffazione. Il libero arbitrio è il grande dono che Dio ci ha fatto e che dovremmo saper usare. C'è molto da meditare su tutta questa esperienza, a parte questi punti che per me andavano evidenziati immediatamente. Ci sono molti punti su cui meditare. Sono interessato alle vostre opinioni e dunque in un video futuro mediteremo insieme. Io vi ringrazio. Io sono Mio Capitano e questo è stato il momento del dolce mistero ad occhi aperti.